Good morning and welcome to day 2 of Festival of Place Social Impact. This is a learning event where we hear from experts and professionals about how we can make a meaningful difference to the lives of people through the design, development, and delivery of property and places. My name's Christine Murray. I'm editor in chief of The Developer and director of the Festival of Place. And I'm really interested in unpicking how to make places where people thrive and bring together property professionals who are interested in creating more inclusive and equitable places to learn and be inspired and connect. Uh, Over 2 days, each of these 8 sessions takes a deep dive into delivering a positive social impact with real life insights or research to share or case studies so that you can benefit from the latest thinking and best practice in this space. You'll walk away with the knowledge you need, I hope, to support better decision making in your work and get a clearer sense of what good looks like. For your convenience, all the sessions have been recorded and they are available to stream live or play back via the schedule button on the top right. So, right after the session finishes, the video will be available to watch or share with colleagues. A reminder, we'll be taking questions from you, the audience, or the live audience. You can put your questions in the Q&A tab in the chat panel to the right of the screen, and please feel free to use the chat to say hello and post your comments. And of course, there's the emoji button to share reactions with the speaker. The speaker slides and other links can be found in the resources tab, which is also on that chat panel. We are an independent publishing and events business, and we rely on our sponsors and organization members to keep these events accessible and our journalism barrier free. So, thank you to LDA Design, who are proud supporters of this event, and thank you to our organization members for their support. Our journalism is funded by these events, and your support makes a real difference to our ability to advocate and educate about how to create more inclusive and impactful places. Yesterday, most of our content was linked to the provision of affordable housing. We know that's a pressing issue with its impact on health, well-being, and quality of life. Today, however, we are turning to the subject of spatial equity. How can we create truly inclusive places that talk about equal access and grant equal access to clean air, water, homes, green space, play space, nighttime safety, or other issues that divide us in the places we live and work? We're starting off today with feminist cities and feminist urban planning, a topic really dear to my heart. It's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Scottish Greens councillor Holly Bruce, councillor for Langslide in Glasgow City Council. As one of the youngest women to serve at Glasgow City Council, Holly is vice chair of the council's Environment and Livable Neighbourhoods Committee. She is a feminist activist who played a key part in the 2021 Young Women Lead research report, Glasgow, a Feminist City. She passed her Feminist City motion in October 2022, committing the council to embed a feminist town planning approach into its city development plan. She's here to tell us about it today and her passion for ensuring that all of these cities, our city places and parks, are accessible to people who are often excluded. So please welcome Holly to the stage. Hello.
Hello, I hope you can hear me okay.
Uh, I can hear you great, and it's great to have you here. You can see the emoji popping up. They're going to continue to do that during your talk.
Excellent.
But thanks so much for coming to speak to us today. And here come your slide. I'm going to pass it over to you straight away, but I'll be back to discuss with you and take questions after your talk.
Amazing. Thanks, Christine. And thanks so much for inviting me here today to discuss this topic. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for being with us today, and thank you for coming along to the session. Christine did a really good introduction there, so I won't go into who I am and why I'm here, but welcome, and I hope that you go away with something useful after listening to me talk about my work in Glasgow. So I really like to start off with these presentations. I've done quite a few of these now since the intro of the policy within Glasgow, and I always like to start with a disclosure that I'm not a planner, I'm not an architect, I don't work in property. My background is in law and policy making. And so I come today with that lens and with that expertise. So I hope that this can relate to you. If there's anything that you don't understand, then please put a question in the chat box. I try and make sure I don't use acronyms or anything like that. But if there is anything, please do put it in the chat box there. So I like to frame this as something, the presentation, as something that you can go away and be active on and do and change and develop within your own place of work. Because this approach really is a systems change that we need. It's not just down to policy making or law changing, it's down to every aspect of civic society. And I think it's useful to start by going through a little short history as to how I got here, what inspired me, and also kind of question the kind of feeling that I started to, well, not started, but was enlightened during lockdown. So um I don't know about you. I'm not sure who's on this call right now in terms of gender diversity, but women and those of marginalized genders, so non-binary people, trans people, have a right to the city, but don't know about you right now. I don't know if you live in urban settings, rural settings, but I don't feel like I'm able to exercise that right. And it was during COVID that it really kind of started for me in terms of thinking about mobility and thinking about space and place. And I was inspired by Leslie Cairn, a feminist urban geographer from Canada. She wrote a book called The Feminist City, which you may or may not have heard of. If you have, give me an emoji so I'm not talking to the void. Yes, fabulous. It's a really, really good book. Oh, lots. Stunning. So a really, really good book that was actually randomly sent to me. I, as many other people did during lockdown, took to reading and was subscribed to Verso, a radical book publisher, and randomly selected a few options and of interest that I was interested in. And this book was sent to me, and it really did open up my eyes to what was lacking within my city. And it explores many different factors of space and place. It speaks about exploring the city as one person, as being a single person, as a woman. It talks about radical ideas such as co-living and housing developments, and how we use care in those settings. So it really did spark something in me to start a campaign, or start to see change within Glasgow. So I joined, so that was 2020. 2021, I joined a Young Women Lead programme, which is a young women's movement in Scotland. They are an organisation and a charity that helps increase women's participation within politics and policy setting. And we did a campaign, Glasgow, a Feminist City. And it was based on a research report that we did in the city in 2021. And that was also over the period of, there was a lot of discourse about women's safety within the media. We had many high profile killings of women, murders of women, Sarah Everard, Sabina, Nessa. There was many, but those were the ones that caught the media's attention. And so this was really interesting, that and really pertinent to that time. And I read the book and pitched this idea to the cohort. There was 20 young women and non-binary people part of that. And you can see that report online if you want to read it in full. We got over 600 responses from young women and non-binary people in the city. And there was 4 core themes that came out of that. And they're probably unsurprising to you in terms of perhaps what you see in consultation within your own communities and within your work. So the first being affordability. And in Glasgow, it is a city that it's got a high level of poverty. And it's got a really terrible transport system, whereby we are blessed with many. We've got a great inner city rail network, we have a subway system, and we have buses, but they don't work together, and they're really expensive. Accessibility was the second point, which was talking about accessibility in the terms of physical disability, or it might be neurodivergency, or it might be accessibility in terms of actually accessing service rather than and it being a physical disability. There was also convenience. So within Glasgow, it's the largest city in Scotland, but it's quite hard to get around due to the bad public transport system, but also due to the fact that there's a lot of local places that has community spaces that are closed or are not access. You can't access it at all the time, and that goes the same for green spaces and the like. And then we had safety as well, which is kind of the topic of this conversation, and it's always the main kind of theme that people want to talk about when we talk about feminist cities. And it is absolutely a crucial element of making our cities more feminist, but it isn't the only one. And I really want to stress that today. We don't want to just make people feel survive within our spaces. We want them to thrive. And that's why affordability, accessibility, and convenience is also really, really important. After that report, many of us presented to the Social Recovery Task Force within the council. I then convinced the Scottish Greens, my party, to put it in our manifesto for election. And then I got the candidacy in 2020 for the party for Langside Ward, and then won that election in 2022. So when I was elected, I basically was like, right, I've done all this work, done this campaign. I really, really want to see this actually come into like some real tangible action. And so I pitched a motion to my group and convinced them and convinced cross party that this would be a good idea and it was something that we needed within our city. And I like to feminist town planning. People are like, what is that? I don't know what that means. And I suppose I'm speaking to a room of professionals who are probably aware of what it is. But this is a definition that I tend to use that is quite easy to understand and can really paint a picture. So it's one that I've kind of amalgamated from Leslie Kern's book, my work, and also to make it intersectional as well. So, what does this policy do? Everyone tends to ask me this, and I've come up against a lot of not criticism, well, yeah, criticism, let's just say it how it is, in terms of why I use the term feminist. And it's it was a conscious choice to use that within the motion. It was something that I felt was crucial to not only empower people and to empower women into wanting to live in more positive, equitable places, but also to challenge that kind of status quo of feminism being a dirty word and it being something that isn't for everyone. We know that feminism at its root is equality. So that was something that I felt was important. And what that then allowed to do is allowed me to be here today. It allowed for public discourse to happen and for people to be excited about this policy and to empower people. And I honestly think if I had put into the motion gender lens or gender sensitive placemaking, it wouldn't have got the response it did. It wouldn't have got the media reaction. It wouldn't have got the emotional reaction that feminism does, positive and negative. So I'm kind of running with the feminism is a crucial part of that of the policy. And in terms of the I mean, what does it do? So I'm sure there's maybe planners in the room that traditionally people have been seen as neutral residents, but that simply does not exist. And everyone has experiences, norms, perspectives that drive their decision making. And I know certainly within planning, it's a male dominated industry. Architecture is a little bit different, but it means that consequently, if you are not applying a gendered lens to your thinking, that we are still designing spaces and places for white cis men, and that needs to change. And that's what this policy aims to do. As I said at the start, intersectionality is super important. Within the policy that was passed, it includes trans women, it includes non-binary people, and we need to start asking questions about the everyday interactions of embodied experience of women, and not everyone is a cardboard cutout of a woman, and I'm one of them. Although I'm young, I'm not young. I'm 30 now, but when I was elected, I was in my late 20s. But I am able-bodied. I am white. I am cis. But there are aspects of who I am and what I experience that is different and that doesn't have as much privilege. Like, I am a queer person. I am also 30, which often young people are left out of these conversations. So intersectionality is super important, and we need to make sure that we're trying to access as many voices as possible when making plans or decisions. As well as that, it's there's so much research on this, and you can look into it. There's many reports, but it's been proven that healthy, climate friendly cities align to gender equal cities. And you can see that from the like placemaking being walkable, proximity to services, mixed use environments. So, one really good thing that I've seen recently is that there's been housing development that is social housing, has put in childcare as part of the development as a service. And I just think that is completely revolutionary and stops the cost of getting children to another area of the city that they live in for childcare. And it just makes child caring and child giving easier. Um, and also another aspect that I've noticed from my interactions with people is that healthy, walkable, pollution-free cities are what women, and often a lot mothers and parents, want for their children. Air quality is so important, especially within urban settings where we haven't broken the link between like mobility and car use. Um, as well as that, it's got wider benefits to women in society. It helps women um, open up their world to opportunities and jobs, and gets them to their healthcare appointments, gets them to participate in political meetings, education. The list goes on, and ensuring women's mobility and women's autonomy and able to dwell in spaces also helps the economy. It helps women want to stay within certain places because they feel safe, because it is accessible, because they can afford to be there. Lessons have been learned from Vienna's planning framework, and I'm sure many of you have heard about their work and what they've been doing to do that. And one of them is the childcare, on-site childcare within housing developments, as well as health services within housing developments. And other aspects that are good and green and environmentally friendly is access to shared car schemes, bike storage, things like that within housing developments. And they've kind of led the way in terms of housing and how we can change place and policy within house building. But it's much more than that. It's about our communities and where we sit within our communities, whether that access to that local park is easy and safe, and whether public squares have seating and play equipment and are accessible to women. And we know that designing spaces for women also means that children will feel safe and feel better. And just lastly, the policy, what it does, it benefits includes absolutely everyone, and the evidence shows that time and time again. Putting a gendered lens doesn't take rights away from anyone. It emboldens them and rebalances the equity that there currently isn't for women and children. So the motion itself, what I thought I'd maybe chat through some of the actions that were embedded in it. So the most meaningful one, and Christine spoke about it early on, was about the city development plan. And in Glasgow, I knew that it was up for renewal, and it's a long process of developing and consulting and getting the best one possible, because they only get renewed maybe every 10 to 15 years. And so I saw this as a unique opportunity to embed a feminist lens into that, and to commit the council into doing that. Now, no one has done this in Scotland. I don't think anyone's ever done it in the UK. or maybe they are in the process of doing so. But so it's a new process, it's a new thing. And I mean, in Scotland, we've got the National Planning Framework 4, which is quite good, and especially in relation to climate and having greener, healthier, more livable spaces. But when I went through it with a kind of fine tooth comb about gender and equality, there wasn't much in it, the social kind of aspect of it. So that's what the motion aims to do, that from the root, from the State Development Plan, which is the big policy document that underpins every planning decision within the city. So that is where the kind of systems change starts. And we're still going through that process. It's not going to be developed until 2027. So we're 3 years into that process, almost in October. And the good thing is that I do have within the city council a really good head of planning, Sarah Shaw, who is really passionate about this as well and is committed to making sure that we can do this to the best of our abilities. But it is the first time, so it's not going to be perfect, but we're going to try our best to make sure that it does embed it from the outset. And there's loads of examples we can go through there in terms of what that looks like. Um, Another thing is better data. So one of the things I noticed was that the inconsistency in the council's data systems and how they didn't disaggregate gender differences, and that is also cut across gender fluid people. It tends to be female male in another way, and I don't know about you, but I don't know anyone who describes themselves as in another way. Maybe people who are experiencing gender dysphoria or are not sure where they are, but in terms of identity, there are so many identities now that can be spoken for and have been researched. So we need that data to ensure that we're getting everyone's experience. Gender incompetence training. So there's a great group within Scotland called the Scottish Women's Budget Group who do a lot of gender mainstreaming work. So we are trying to get them to come in the council to do training with our officers that do the quality impact assessing. That has not came to fruition yet, even though I've been trying very, very hard. But it is something that I'm hoping to see action on very, very soon. In terms of the quality impact assessments, the EQIAs that are done to measure the impact of policies, I'm not sure what the system is in England or Wales or Ireland, but in Scotland, there's a public sector equality duty, which basically mandates that equality impact assessments are done on policies. They're not very well done. They're very tick box. They often carried out way too late, and there's little evidence to actually measure the quality of the policy, because some policies are bad, and we need to know that. We need to know how many people that will affect, what the financial implications, the environmental implications, and what the equality implications are. And then two other related things is the misogyny, a human rights issue report. So in Scotland, there's a report done a few years ago that looked at misogyny in public life. And this is kind of the cultural piece. So a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about has been like infrastructure or kind of planning and the kind of big, I was going to say master planning, but I've stopped myself from saying master planning before because it's gendered. So planning, and this is the cultural piece. So in Scotland, we're hoping to, there's an election next year, so hopefully that it will be tabled. But it's they're pitching, because of this report, law that basically criminalizes men's behavior in public that is harassing, or that is that is harassing. So that can be anything from catcalling to misogynistic language to um, harassment in the kind of physical sense. So an example would be like I've experienced on public transport, men removing my earphones to talk to me, even though complete strangers, even though I am within my own little bubble and I did not consent to them to do that. So like things, microaggressions, things like that really nips it in the bud. And I mean, everyone's talking about adolescence right now and the impact of that. And I think it's great that there's been more discussion on it, but there needs to be real interventions across the board, not just showcasing a Netflix documentary in schools. So this really does help with those microaggression behaviors and criminalizes it, and hopefully will start to change behavior. And then also public transport is super, super important. So lastly, I kind of want to go through some wins, and I think I've got 5 more minutes with you before we go to questions. So I think this is super important to kind of take stock of where my journey has gone and where Glasgow's journey has gone over the past 2.5 years of this policy being passed. So first thing was it took a while, but we got a feminist urbanism political oversight group. So that is a cross party group that is basically the main vehicle for all of this work within the council because it is so far reaching. And it's got representatives from lots of different council departments, so transport, parks, violence against women, which is really interesting because Kirsty, who is an amazing, she's our VOG coordinator within Glasgow, hasn't even been in the world of planning before. And this is a whole new thing for her to be introduced to. And I think it's super important that we get everyone that is relevant round the table to ensure that they are aware and also can learn from each other. Like planners can learn from the violence against women and girls sector in terms of what is that intervention that's needed. So that's really, really exciting. The past 2 years within our budget, I've managed to secure £500,000 in each budget. Not a lot of money in the grand scheme of things, but we can see some real tangible projects getting built from the ground. So one of which will be in my own ward. Well, no, it's adjacent to my ward, which has been a long-term campaign to get lighting within the park, which I can talk at length. That's probably another presentation in itself. But that money has now been secured to get solar lighting put in the park, and hopefully that will come to fruition soon. Another interesting one that might pique your interest is the procurement side of things. So within our council, we have the Livable Neighbourhoods team, which is a team that of kind of not planners, but they blend the 20-minute city principle with placemaking consultation. So they go out into communities and really speak to communities about what they want, and sometimes we have to procure for that. And within the the kind of procurement, what's the word I'm looking for? Like process in the application form from whoever is wanting the contract, they have to prove that their feminist lens thinking within their process. And that was a first that has been done in Glasgow. And it meant that from the outset, a gendered lens, they had to show how a gendered lens is going to be applied. Excuse me. And I believe that there's something that can be learned from that in terms of how we do our pre-application stages of planning within the city council. Few others, a personal favorite is the public toilet strategy. So that's another thing that I've been as my kind of pet piece is that a year later, after the motion was passed, I passed another motion about public toilets and the lack of them and how we needed a strategy for the city. We have just published 2 weeks ago, the council have just published the first public toilet strategy that Glasgow's ever done. And they've done a really good job. To start with, a paper came and I was really unhappy because it was very just talking about one contract that offers 3 public toilets in the entire city, when actually it's a much bigger conversation and affects every single one of us. We all need to go to the toilet every day, and some people feel that more acutely than others. So yeah, that's been great too. And another aspect, and I'll maybe end on this, is campaign data. So within the Glasgow Violence Against Women Partnership, we have a group of campaigners called the Glasgow Girls Club, and they did a commonplace map exercise where they asked people to pinpoint where in the city they didn't feel safe or where they didn't have access to things. And we managed to use that raw data, and I gave it to the lighting department who had never done anything like this before and was like, can you sort these lights? Can you look into making this better? Can you cut back those bushes? Like, gave it to the kind of parks and lighting department and roads department within Glasgow City Council, who, let's be honest, in terms of Glasgow, mostly ran by men who don't think about these things or who haven't been thinking about these things for a very long time. And they've been really receptive to it and really keen to make change there, which has been great news. So yeah, thanks to Andy Waddle within the ops team for that. And then next steps in terms of what I'm doing. So as Christine said, I'm the vice chair of the Environment and Livable Neighbours Committee. So that's kind of like your parks, your bins, your lights, your roads, your public toilets. So I'll continue to push that work through there. I also am the chair of the Glasgow Violence Against Women Partnership, that acronym there. So a lot of culture change work going through there. And then also my colleague, Lana Reid McConnell, who's incredible. You should look into her work as well. She has a background in sustainability consultancy, and she chairs the Net Zero Committee that is doing a lot of stuff on this as well. We've got the Feminist Urbanism Political Oversight Group, and working together with the likes of yourselves, other councillors, councils, Scottish Government and UK Government, if they're keen as well. I have had a few interactions with mostly the Scottish Government. The Chief Planner of Scotland is very keen on this area as well. There has been a wee bit of reshuffling in terms of ministerial people, the administration within the Scottish Government. So things have not been as progressive as I'd like, but the Chief Planner of Scotland, who is a woman, is very, very keen to progress this policy and see tangible action from it too. And then lastly, next steps, what you can do. One thing I've learned along the way is that yes, people consult, and yes, people, well, they try to consult, but working directly with women and non-binary folk to help co-design. I've been hosting feminist walks within my community. There's been 2 now, and I've convinced consultancy firms to do the same so that you can be on the ground with those women and not just have a flip chart or a survey and talk to them about their neighborhood and let them lead. Often it's like people come in and do these things, and people feel like they're being spoken at rather than with. So yeah, let them lead the way, let them do the work, don't do the work, but showcase what they love about their community and what they think could be better about it. Feed guiding principles, so the theory and kind of the work that some of the strategies that I'm exploring into your work at every stage. So from the very beginning, not at the end. Learn from toolkits. So there's been lots, and I saw that LD Design sponsors some of this festival as well. So yeah, LD Design have been doing good work. ARP have been doing good work. Make Space for Girls campaign group. And also, if you haven't seen or heard, May East, who is a researcher, has written a book called What If Women Designed the City. She did showcases, test cases. Yeah, test case in Scotland, in Perth, Glasgow, and Edinburgh. And she really taught me about that, the concept of walking and talking and really listening to people within communities, and her style of consultation is really, really good. So I'd encourage you to check that out. And then working again together with as many people as you can, because as I said right at the beginning, it is systems change. It's not one policy, it's not one law. It's a big, big piece of work that we all need to try and get our teeth into and do our best to change how society works with women, or doesn't at the moment work for women. And I'm going to end by a quote that I quite like from Leslie Kearns' book, which I believe kind of sums up kind of where we're at. So it's by having a geographical perspective on gender, we begin to understand how misogyny functions on the ground. Male power and privilege is upheld by keeping women's movement limited and access to space constrained. And I'm sure we all here want to see women feel more safe and free within their communities. So that is my call to action today for you. Thank you so much. And there are my details, my email address, my socials. And we're going on to questions, I think. Now I see Christine's
We
face on
are.
screen.
I'm here with you. And thank you so much for your talk, Holly. It was really great to hear that. The questions are starting to come in, and I'm going to encourage you to put them in the Q&A tab. But if I could pick up on a couple things you mentioned. Um, so one of them, I think you mentioned the data that you need to collect. You mentioned the kind of need to you've been able to kind of use other people's data to support those parks decisions, for example, in those things. So I guess I wanted to check how much that measurement or data is necessary to fuel change, and what is it that we don't know? What is it that we need to be collecting? You mentioned the voices and experiences, but is it important to have that kind of 26% or 27 women, or kind of more sources of data that to support these decisions?
Yeah, I mean, as my background is in law, evidence is so important, and but it's meaningful consultation and meaningful evidence. Like, I can give an example of where I first started as the vice chair of the Environment and Livable Neighbourhoods Committee, whereby we were talking about the transport strategy. And within the survey respondents to the strategy, it was around 75% male and white of respondents. Now, if we're serious about gender equality and listening to women and those of marginalized genders, I'd be going back out and saying that's not good enough. We need to go and actively tap on the doors of the people that we're not seeing here. The outcome might be the same, but we do not know that. And we do not know if we're missing something there that is very, very important. So data is crucial, and how we collect and disaggregate it and disaggregate experiences is also important. And sometimes we see friction between different groups, people with different wants and needs. And an example I would give is I was saying earlier about the park's lighting and how we have environmentalists and activists within the park that don't want to see lights there. And we see women who live in the neighborhood want to access the park. So that you would say traditionally they're in conflict with each other. But actually, if you break it down and you listen to what exactly they're saying, so the parks group wanted to make sure the bats were going to be affected by lights. So then we got a survey done and we managed to come to a compromise position whereby there was blackout areas where, and also those areas the women didn't even want to go to in the park. So it all they wanted was a way through, and to have the big communal big spaces accessible, like we've got an arena within the park. So there are often, you can see data sets that are in conflict, but if you actually delve into it and speak to people and come to you can come to a compromise and come to a position where everyone is happy.
I think that's part of the power in your stories. You talk about getting that crossbench support, and that word feminism being really important to that crossbench support. Now you're talking about getting the bats and the women, or the bat people and the women people around the table, and coming to some kind of agreement over these routes. Uh, it's just, I think that is, there's a feeling that we are in a polarized we're in a polarized society where crossbench or common ground is harder to find. That's not what I'm hearing from you. So is it, is this a perception of a barrier, or is it just that we need to fight our way through to that common ground?
Yeah, it's an accurate read in terms of what we're seeing in like the media and what we're seeing within some communities in the UK. But I do feel like the vast majority of society, people coexist together. They've coexisted for a very long time, and there are ways of which that we can be harmonious. When human rights are at are at a detriment, then that is when there's issues. And I think, yeah, it's an interesting one. And I think that in terms of my work, I'm always, I would never kind of jeopardize. And I've said from like the start, if I jeopardize my values and my deep rooted values, then I'm out, I'm done. But when you are working with communities that are very diverse, you do have to listen and consider opinions that you might never have considered before or looked at things at a different angle. Um, but you could say me being elected in the position that I'm doing, people have been looking at things in the angle that I'm putting forward in policy now that people are really responding to. So it is a difficult one. I mean, in terms of like politics, constructive politics is always better, and policy making is better policy than it being so polarized.
So there's a comment here from Claire Richards, a question and comment. She's the founder of Footwork. I'm struck by how relevant this is to communities as a whole, addressing top-down thinking, well-being, and social equality more generally. Do you think by creating a feminist approach to planning, you're tackling wider issues or these wider issues around top-down thinking, well-being, and social equality?
Yeah, I do. And I think it's part of that kind of, the infrastructure is one thing, but the cultural thing is another piece. And I think that's why it's so important that within society we have things like the misogyny laws that are going to be put through in Scotland, hopefully soon. That's a crucial piece in terms of society, in terms of structurally within institutions or organizations, having like cross-cutting like influence and buy-in is so important, because like I said, the lighting people within Glasgow City Council didn't even think about the safety implications of lighting not being out, or didn't use that as a measurement. And we're very receptive to it. So often it's not a case of people don't want to. It's often ignorance and just like lack of education, and not and wanting to continue with the status quo. And I think we have to start asking those questions and work with people. And sometimes it's people that we don't want to have to work with, but in order to see progress, you're going to have to. And I mean, yeah, as I said, another example is the violence against women coordinator. She hadn't ever seen safety through an infrastructure planning architectural lens before, and now she's part of that group. So it's about making those connections.
Millie Warner from Stride to Ground wants to hear more about co-design, that you mentioned it alongside the walking consultations. And could you speak a little more about what co-design means to you in a practical sense? So how do you facilitate empowered participation?
Yeah, so I'm not the expert in this, but as I mentioned, May East, her work is really, really good, and she does the feminist walks, and she spoke to over 300 women in Glasgow, and collected data over years, and she does the walks, and the route is often set by the women themselves. So like it's not a prescribed route by like the consultor or May or whoever's facilitating the walk. They facilitate it, they do the route so that they can show you the areas that they are passionate about. One of the things from that May speaks about in her book that I've taken away is starting from a place of what is strong, not what is wrong, because often you can get improvements or things that are needing changes through the strong part and seeing them develop, and then you go into what is wrong, because that is often people in communities come at it so negatively, and they're angry and they're frustrated, and they can, and then you take on that kind of trauma and anguish, and it's not a helpful starting point. It absolutely hear them and empathize, and I get it. There's a back lane in the back of my court right now that is filled with fly tipping that I've been trying to get sorted for years, and I'm a counsellor and can't even get it sorted. So there's like those kind of things that I think starting from a place of what is strong rather than what is wrong is really, really good. And as well as that, like the act of deep listening, like genuinely listening, not listening with a preconceived idea or a brief. It's going in and genuinely listening. I know that sounds so simple, but it really is the kind of bread and butter on how you get communities on side, and how you can get people to feel like they're genuinely being consulted and that what they're saying makes a difference.
I know we did some training on trauma-informed design processes and really not having people not having to tell you about difficult things that happen to them as part of it, where they can still share as you said, starting from what's strong, they can share, spaces that actually make them feel good, and spaces that actually support them, as opposed to always having to share where you feel scared in your neighborhood, or where you feel threatened in your neighborhood, which of course is important, or information that we want, but perhaps can be really triggering for people who've had really terrible experiences. So yeah, it feels like a thin line to tread, but as you said, those kind of genuine conversations and genuine listening seem key to that. Esther from Paprika has just commented, "Therein lies the rub, genuinely consultant." Do you see genuine consultation on the rise, or is there hope that this policy transformation will really mandate better consultation?
Yes and no, which is not a helpful answer. I'm seeing really good work within Glasgow is with there's a um, consultancy and architecture firm called New Practice who I've been working alongside who've been doing really good work. And have been like asking me questions and helping me to work alongside them. But then there's other kind of unfortunately other companies and organizations that are actually regressing on this, and it's because they see the standard as the legal standard, rather than the like going above and beyond the legal standard. So like I was
Mm,
mentioning, the data analysis there, and EDI policies are equality, diversity, and inclusion practices are being stripped back. And we're seeing that a lot in America at the moment. And there's a bit of a scare of that happening in the UK at the moment. So I am concerned that we will regress back in terms of data and hearing from the diverse voices. And I have heard some issues of that happening in Glasgow, and elsewhere as well. So yeah, be robust in that as much as you can and with as much power as you have. So yeah.
Well, we had several investors yesterday who were affirming their commitment to continue with their EDI policies, that there's no change in their decision making at this point. So hopefully some heartening news coming from the money side of things, the private money side of things, saying they are staying the course, unlike some things happening in America. So this is kind of bringing us to the end of our session, which is sad. But the good news for the audience is that we've recorded a great 1 hour podcast with Holly in addition. So that'll be coming out over the next few weeks. And so look out for that if you want to hear more. But in the meantime, thank you so much, Holly, for joining us at Festival of Place Social Impact. And keep in touch. I'm going to be following that misogyny bill. These cultural changes are really interesting. They're an area we don't really have a lot of, or we feel we don't have a lot of power over. So it's really amazing to see a policy, coming through to address some of those public space negative behaviors.
Yeah, it's no mean feat, but I really enjoy the work, and it's become more than a job to me. It's become a way of being, and it's become a hobby in itself as well. But thank you so much for having me on. Thank you to everyone for listening, and yeah, listen to the podcast if you want to hear more. Hopefully, there's some more exciting content on there too. But I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and yeah, we can connect. Please feel free to email me if you've got any questions or you'd like to collaborate. Thank you.
Amazing. So we are back on the hour with another session with Sophie Thompson of LDA Design and Chris Coster of Coastal Partners. We're continuing our theme of special equity, and now we're turning to flood resilience work and climate resilience work, and how we can use that funding to deliver a maximum social impact. So that session is called Beyond the Water: Infrastructure and Social Equity, and it's on the hour. We'll see you back here in 10 minutes.